Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever really considered what energy security truly means? Most of us probably think it's just about, having enough power, right? Keeping the lights on. But what if I told you it's a concept as old as fire, yet one that still defies a single universal definition? And it impacts pretty much everything from global politics right down to your daily commute.
It's true. It's quite remarkable, really, for a concept so fundamental to our global energy system, something that shapes policies and regulations all over the world. Well, a comprehensive shared understanding has been a surprising gap in research and in practice, too.
Exactly. And that's precisely why today we're doing a deep dive into this incredibly insightful source, Dimensions and Definitions of Energy Security, a literature review. This study systematically reviews all these existing definitions and actually builds a structural framework for energy security. It identifies not just a few, but 15 distinct dimensions.
15, yeah. It's
Yeah.
quite comprehensive.
It really is. It feels like getting a unique perspective, maybe a shortcut, to truly being well-informed on a topic that's, well, far broader and more interconnected than you might initially imagine.
hmm Our mission for you today really is to help you navigate what energy security genuinely entails. We want to highlight how all these different dimensions interrelate, often in ways that get overlooked. This study reveals some crucial insights for everyone, but maybe especially for policymakers. It's about getting to the core of this really complex and, frankly, evolving idea.
So it's easy to assume energy security became, hot topic just recently, perhaps with current global events. But this study points out the concept is quite literally as old as fire.
Right.
You think about early humans needing to secure wood, to keep warm, to cook their food. The need itself was always there.
That's absolutely right. While that primal need for energy security has always existed, the scientific analysis and the documented definitions, they only really began appearing around 1975, mostly in the aftermath of the 1973 energy crisis. Before 2001, publications were pretty rare. But the 21st century saw this explosion of interest, and this surge was driven by a whole host of factors, things like rising energy prices, our growing economic dependence on energy, global supply crises,
Sure.
the undeniable impacts of climate change, ongoing political conflicts, and also this increasing recognition of energy security as a core national security issue.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting for me. The study points out how often energy security has been defined too narrowly, or sometimes just disparately, all over the place, making it abstract, kind of vague, and incredibly difficult to pin down. For instance, you hear the phrase security of supply constantly, right? But this study highlights that's only one part of the bigger picture.
Exactly, just one part.
It often leaves out crucial dimensions like, say, environmental impact or managing demand or efficiency. Why do you think such a critical concept stayed so fuzzy for so long?
Well, a big part of it seems to be that the definition evolved reactively, often in direct response to crises. So back in the 1970s, the focus was almost exclusively on just ensuring sufficient supply for the national economy, keep the factories running, that sort of thing.
Right.
The 1980s started to introduce a few more dimensions, and then the 1990s brought in this idea of loss of welfare, basically. What happens to people's quality of life if energy isn't secure?
Okay, so a bit broader.
A bit broader, yeah. And then in the 21st century, international organizations really got involved and they started pushing the boundaries. Definitions expanded quite rapidly to include notions like locality, import reliance, physical availability, freedom from risks and disruptions. A lot of that influenced by conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan.
I see.
We saw infrastructure, national power, even environmental concerns finally being added more consistently. By the period 2006-2010, the study identified 21 different definitions just floating around in the literature.
Wow, 21. That's
Yes.
all the definitions for one concept.
It is. And that trend sort of continued with researchers adding more and more dimensions, making the definitions longer, more complex. But the research also points to a more recent alternative approach emerging,
Okay.
which is about simplifying the definition but making it comprehensive enough to apply across any energy system, whether you're talking oil, gas, or electricity, and crucially incorporating this notion of risk. It's about building a definition that's robust, not just constantly reacting.
So after meticulously tracking, 66 different definitions across 104 sources, that's a huge amount of work. What did this study finally land on as their chosen definition for energy security?
Their chosen definition is this: the feature, measure, situation, or a status in which a related system functions optimally and sustainably in all its dimensions, freely from any threats.
Okay, optimally and sustainably in all its dimensions, freely from any threats. That sounds incredibly comprehensive.
Yeah.
What makes that particular phrasing so holistic? How does it capture all the complexities we've just been talking about?
Well, it's holistic precisely because it incorporates all aspects of the energy system, supply, demand, and the transfer between them, along with that critical element of sustainability. And maybe most importantly, it explicitly accounts for threats, risks, and vulnerabilities. It emphasizes that the system needs to be able to cope with disruptive events. It isn't just about having enough energy right now, it's about long-term resilience, robustness.
That definition really is the perfect springboard for the really insightful part of this deep dive.
Hmm.
Understanding those 15 distinct dimensions this study systematically identified. He said
Mm.
no previous literature had really connected all of them like this before.
That's what the study suggests, yeah. It feels like they were really trying to build a comprehensive map of the entire energy security landscape, putting all the known pieces together in one framework.
It does feel like that.
And while some dimensions, things like availability, cost, policy, those were consistently discussed in the existing literature, sure. But others, like cybersecurity, were surprisingly neglected, especially given how important they are now. The study really underscores a critical point. Ignoring any single one of these dimensions can lead to a dangerously imbalanced understanding, and, by extension, flawed policymaking. Because they are all profoundly interdependent. You can't just focus on one and hope for the best.
Right, you pull one thread and the whole thing moves. So let's start mapping this out. Let's begin with one that seems obvious, maybe, but holds some surprising twists. Availability. The research confirms it's fundamental for economic growth, for welfare.
Absolutely fundamental. But it's far more complex than just the physical existence of energy resources, like oil or gas reserves. Globally, there's technically enough energy for the foreseeable future, especially when you factor in renewables. I mean, the study mentions the theoretical potential of solar energy alone was 7,000 times global consumption back in 2013.
Wow.
Diet. The distribution of fossil fuels is highly uneven. Then you have the availability of the means to actually transform those resources into useful services, things like pipelines, power plants, grids, the vital infrastructure. And then there's even the availability of consumers, which the study interestingly calls security of demand. You need buyers for the energy, too.
It's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? But this study reveals that even abundance can be a trap, a threat, almost.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about the Dutch disease, where a country's currency gets overvalued because of its natural resource exports. And that, ironically, leads to a decline in its other industrial sectors.
Right, it harms diversification.
Exactly. Or the resource curse, where having lots of energy wealth tempts those in power to use it for personal gain, sometimes even against the welfare of their own people. And that can potentially spark civil wars or military coups. It makes you question if you're really securing energy or just securing a commodity at a much deeper societal cost.
That's a crucial, sobering point. Another critical dimension highlighted by the research is diversity. This work strongly echoes that famous Winston Churchill quote, "Energy security lies in variety and variety only."
Oh, yes, I know that one.
A more diverse system is generally more secure. Because if one part malfunctions, say, one fuel source disappears or one supplier cuts off alternatives can step in, it prevents a total collapse.
And this isn't just about diversifying the fuels themselves, oil, gas, electricity. It's also about diversifying the sources, avoiding over-reliance on a single country, like Europe's historical dependence on Russian gas, for instance.
Precisely. And it also means diversifying technologies.
Mhm.
Renewables are constantly promoting new energy pathways, adding to that mix. And even diversifying consumers, spreading demand across different markets and sectors, makes the whole system less vulnerable to shocks in one area.
Is there a good example of this?
Yeah, the study provides a compelling one. The energy security contrast between Germany and France back in early 2017. France, which relies very heavily on nuclear energy, actually experienced power shortages because of some security failures at its plants. They were forced to import power.
Wow.
Germany, meanwhile, had a much higher share of wind and solar integrated alongside its coal and gas. They managed to balance their system much more effectively and avoided similar widespread issues. It really demonstrates the resilience that diversity can bring.
Okay, so diversity helps reduce risk. But what's the actual cost involved? The cost of security itself and what happens when the system does fail? That brings us to the next dimension, cost. The study argues it's often treated too simply, maybe just as affordability for the end user. But it's so much more, isn't it?
It's profoundly more. It absolutely includes the cost of supply disruption, and that can be staggering. The research cites some older estimates, but they put the cost of a significant oil disruption in the American economy at something like $936 billion back in 2016. for losing just 10 million barrels per day for a single year. Imagine the ripple effects.
Unbelievable. And then there's the other side of the coin. The cost of actually securing the system itself. Is that spending justified? This study highlights figures like the U.S. reportedly spending around $50 billion a year just on security presence in the Middle East, and that doesn't even include direct war costs. And an estimate of $6.8 trillion in 2008 dollars for force projection in the Persian Gulf just between 1976 and 2007.
Yeah, those numbers are astronomical, and it raises that really important, difficult question for policymakers. Is this level of spending truly justified for energy security? The research suggests that looking towards lower-cost long-term solutions, like many renewables, which have high upfront capital costs but then near-zero running costs, represents a key path toward a future that's both more secure and more cost-effective.
Right. Speaking of renewables, the technology and efficiency dimension is incredibly fascinating. You might think efficiency is just, using less energy, turning off lights, but this study really opens up that idea to a much broader scope.
It really does. While improving appliance performance, more efficient fridges, better insulation, that certainly helps, yes. But the largest gains in energy efficiency, according to this research, come from a more fundamental shift, moving away from burning fuels altogether.
How so?
Well, think about transitioning from conventional thermal power plants. Typically, two-thirds of the energy input in those plants is just lost as waste heat. Compare that to highly efficient solar and wind systems. Or switching from internal combustion engines in cars, which are also quite inefficient, to battery electric vehicles. These kinds of technological shifts dramatically increase the overall system efficiency. You need less primary energy input to get the same services like miles driven or comfortable homes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But it raises a critical question then for all of us. If renewables and EVs are so much more efficient in that system sense, why aren't we seeing an even faster global transition?
Well, the study brings up the concept of the rebound effect.
The rebound effect, right?
Yeah, sometimes the efficiency gains we make are partly offset because people end up using more energy services, simply because they've become cheaper or easier to access due to the efficiency improvement. It's a subtle but really significant behavioral threat to achieving those long-term energy security and climate goals.
A tricky problem. Okay, next dimension, environment. This
Yeah.
study takes a very firm stance here, doesn't it? The environmental concerns must be seen as an integral dimension of energy security.
Absolutely. As the study puts it, quite directly, no form of energy production or use is without environmental impact. It's unavoidable.
And this isn't just about carbon emissions and climate change, though that's obviously huge. It's also about the impacts of extraction methods. Oil spills, the chemical dangers linked to fracking. It's about land use deforestation for biomass, or the study mentions the unromantic moonscape left behind by lignite coal mines. And of course, the unavoidable multi-generational challenge of dealing with nuclear waste disposal. Every energy source has its own environmental footprint.
And crucially, the research also highlights the profound two-way impact of climate change itself on energy security. It's not just that energy use causes climate change. Climate change threatens energy systems. Well, okay, there might be some minor potential positive effects like new Arctic sea routes opening up, or maybe reduced heating demand in some northern regions. The negative impacts outweigh them by orders of magnitude.
Give me an example.
Imagine sea levels rising by 7 meters if Greenland's ice sheet melts completely. That would require redesigning practically all coastal energy infrastructure, worldwide ports, power plants, transmission lines. Or just think back to the devastating impact of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita on the U.S. electricity and gas infrastructure in the Gulf Coast. Climate change isn't some external factor anymore. It actively shapes our energy security landscape today and tomorrow.
Definitely a sobering thought. Moving to another critical area, but one that the study says is often overlooked, cybersecurity.
Okay.
This study actually found it's the least discussed dimension in the literature they reviewed. That's surprising, isn't
It
it?
is quite startling, yeah. Especially when you consider that our entire energy infrastructure, from production facilities and pipelines to transmission grids and even down to individual smart meters in homes, is increasingly digitally controlled.
Right. It's all connected.
Exactly. And a successful cyber attack on these systems could cause tremendous economic loss, widespread physical disruption, maybe even endanger lives. This study reminds us of incidents like the Stuxnet attack that targeted Iranian nuclear facilities, or the Shamoon attack on Saudi Aramco that wiped data from thousands of computers, or even a U.S. nuclear plant, Davis-Besse, being forced offline for 5 hours just because of a computer virus that spread through a contractor's network.
It's a really sobering thought that significant parts of our energy grid, particularly older parts, were developed long before cybersecurity was a major consideration. And the vulnerabilities of many industrial control systems are often, perhaps, severely underestimated.
Hmm. This dimension truly highlights how crucial IT expertise in building digital resilience are becoming for the security of the entire energy system. It's not just about pipes and wires anymore.
Definitely not. Now, the study goes on to cover several other interconnected dimensions pretty thoroughly. Maybe we can touch on them briefly.
Sure, there's health, for instance. The study recognizes this profound two-way relationship between human well-being and energy systems. You can think of the direct impact of air pollution from burning fossil fuels on public health, respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular problems, or consider the health crises that can emerge when energy access is suddenly cut off for communities, impacting heating, cooling, medical equipment.
Right. Then there's culture. This dimension illustrates how our societal values, our traditions, deeply influence the energy choices we make and our consumption patterns. And conversely, how energy conditions can actually shape entire cultures. The study cites examples like gasoline lines in America potentially leading to social unrest or violence back in the 70s, or how access to modern energy fundamentally shapes daily life and expectations around the world.
Literacy is also highlighted. This emphasizes that public knowledge and awareness about energy issues are absolutely crucial for effective energy security policies, but also for individual actions. An informed populace can better understand the trade-offs, adapt to changes, conserve energy, and support necessary, sometimes difficult, transitions.
Makes sense. And employment this dimension shows how energy security directly impacts job markets. You see job creation in new sectors like renewables, but also potential job losses in traditional energy industries that need managing. And just the availability of stable, affordable energy directly influences a country's overall workforce productivity and economic stability.
Then there's policy. This dimension really reveals how energy security is inseparable from political interests and governance structures. Government decisions, like subsidies. The study points out the staggering figure of maybe $5 trillion in global fossil fuel subsidies annually.
5 trillion.
Yeah. Decisions like that are often unsustainable in the long run, and they distort market choices, making genuine, balanced energy security much harder to achieve. There's also a challenging observation in the research suggesting that oil and democracy do not mix well, implying that powerful energy elite interests can often clash with the broader population's will, even within nominally democratic systems.
That's a powerful, maybe controversial point from the study, and linked to that is a concept they mentioned of securitization, where an energy issue gets framed as an existential threat, specifically to legitimize using extraordinary measures, sometimes even including military force. That's a concerning aspect of this policy dimension.
It is. And finally, the military dimension is covered explicitly. It details how energy is, of course, essential for military purposes, powering vehicles, bases, operations, strategic assets, and conversely, how military conflicts throughout history have frequently revolved around controlling or disrupting energy resources, making energy itself both a weapon and a primary target.
So 15 dimensions, all interconnected, all vital. After this deep dive, what does this all really mean for you, our listener?
Well, I think this deep dive into dimensions and definitions of energy security, a literature review, truly does unravel the sheer complexity of energy security. It makes it clear it's not some static concept you can just define once and be done with. It's a dynamic, multifaceted challenge, and it's influenced by this vast web of interconnected factors. Understanding all 15 of these dimensions, from availability and diversity right through to cybersecurity and policy, is absolutely crucial if you want a truly holistic view.
Yeah, I think the study's most profound takeaway, for me at least, is that ignoring any of these dimensions will inevitably lead to imbalanced outcomes, to flawed decisions regarding energy security. It just underscores the profound interdependence of everything from our natural environment and our collective health to global politics and the digital infrastructure that underpins, well, pretty much everything in our daily lives now.
Which leads us to an important question for you, the listener, to consider. Knowing that energy security is really this dynamic feature of a system functioning optimally and sustainably in all its dimensions, truly free from threats. What specific dimension do you think is most critical right now? Which one needs the most urgent attention for shaping a resilient and thriving future, both for your own community and for the world?
It's definitely about moving beyond those simplistic ideas we might have started with and really embracing the full, fascinating, sometimes challenging complexity of energy security as a truly interconnected global issue.